So I'm here with Gareth Jones, one of the original founders and self-proclaimed captain of innovation at Welsh Ice. I suppose the best place to start is, what is Welsh Ice?
Welsh Eyes is a community of entrepreneurs, so it's a collection of over 100 or so founders of kind of exciting new generation businesses.
Okay, so going back to the beginning, where are you originally from?
So I'm from Llangollen in North Wales. I moved down here 8 or 9 years ago for uni, but dropped out for the second time and was trying to work out what to do with my life.
What was it like growing up in Llangollen?
It's the kind of place I don't think you appreciate it till you've moved away.
Okay.
Llangollen is a great place going back to, but growing up it felt pretty boring and dull and like nothing exciting ever happened there. So I think I appreciate it more now. It's the kind of place where like every single day you could go and do something completely different. You could kind of go through so many different woods or climb up to the castle or walk along the canal, walk along the river. There's so much to do, but something that I probably didn't appreciate much as a kid.
So as when you were sort of child or teenager, did you have any hobbies or passions?
Not really. I was a pretty boring teenager. I was a video gamer, and that was about it, really.
That's a hobby and passion.
It was a hobby and a passion, but it wasn't one that led to an ability to hold a conversation with an adult or the ability to propel myself into any other kind of career opportunities. So it wasn't really. Whilst it was something that now our generation has matured to a point where there are kind of leaders of organisations who are gamers and politicians who are gamers and everything like that, it makes more sense. But in that generation, it was seen as something which wasn't too great.
Makes sense. So did you then go on to college, or what was the process?
So after school, I was in school in Dinas-Bran, Llangollen. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I always did quite well. I always did very well until I got to about my GCSE age, and I realised that it wasn't cool to do well. So I started to kind of care less, and also because I didn't really have a path ahead of me through education, I started to care less about that and tried to then work out a bit more about what it was I wanted to do. So I started sixth form. I left after a year because I didn't really feel like I fitted in too well. Went to college in Wrexham. Made a huge new group of kind of friends, and that was great.
What course did you take?
So when I moved to Wrexham, I was able to transfer my media studies AS level. So I did my A level in media studies, and then I started afresh with psychology, IT, and something else. Yeah, but it wasn't. It wasn't with the view to go to university or anything. It was just really about continuing to learn. So the only A level I have is in media studies.
Okay.
And then after that year, when all my friends went to uni, I tried to work out then again what I wanted to do, and I started doing a course in fashion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's something which not many people know. And then when I got to about October, I had something called impetigo. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like a kind of, it was like this thing under my arm, which was basically like eating all my flesh, which was pretty grim, but it was super contagious, so I couldn't go to college for like 6 weeks. So I dropped out. That was the first time I dropped out, really, apart from maybe the sixth form thing. And then I got a job in a shop and just existed doing that.
After the 6 weeks, though?
Yeah, like that was in January once everything had kind of cleared out.
Okay. And where was that job at?
Orange Retail in Wrexham, working in a phone shop. Yeah.
So at this point, was this the uni in Cardiff or the first uni?
This was before uni. It was after working in Orange for I guess that would have been 18 months. Was then I decided to go to uni in Wrexham, and I started studying building maintenance management because I thought that would get me a nice safe job.
Yeah. So then, from there, you're in Cardiff. How did that come about? How much of an experience was that coming from north to south?
So the decision to move to Cardiff was after studying in Wrexham. I was studying for 2 years. I was offered a job in Manchester, took that, left after 18 months doing that, and then I decided that I'd come to Cardiff for a fresh start my studies again, fresh start, and it seemed like the right thing to do. It was great, but I realised again then that making a decision on my kind of education career, just based on thinking I'd get a safe job at the end of it, was not really a strong enough motivator for me.
That makes sense.
So I wasn't really inspired by the course I was doing. I wasn't really believing too much in the future of where that would lead to. Yeah, and so as a result, I just disengaged completely.
Okay. And did you drop out at that point, or?
Yeah, that was at the end of that year. I dropped out again, and then I was feeling pretty low, not really knowing what to do in my life.
So looking back on that, do you feel that deciding not to follow education, do you think it's been a help or a hindrance, or?
I don't think I understood what options were available to me when I was that age. I think there was this illusion created that there was a lot of choice, but it didn't really play out that way. I mean, what I'm doing now could never have been predicted by a careers advisor,
No.
and there isn't an ideal path that I would have taken to get to this point. So I think what would have been much more important for me was to understand the importance of skills like tenacity and resilience, and building that belief that there will always be another opportunity, rather than looking at it as being education for a job.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Education for life, not education for a job, I suppose.
Definitely, and they say we all have decisions, so we don't have to just follow the norm. So then, as you mentioned, where you are now, which is Welsh Ice, could you share with us when that began, when the thinking around that began, and what it is again?
Yeah, I mean, so we opened in July 2012, started working on the idea in around August 2011, with the view to basically bring together a group of like-minded people. So I was involved with things like the Prince's Trust and a group called Welsh Sparks, and then Ignite, who were the kinds of people that really kind of brought me up.
Okay.
But I didn't connect with them often enough. So I would kind of be really kind of up and down throughout the month working on projects, and that group would bring me up. And it was that kind of idea of, well, how do we bring these people together on a more regular basis so that not only me, but so that everyone stays at that level.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot more people struggle with that than really let on.
Yeah.
So that was the mission, was to create an environment where those people could come together on a regular basis.
Just a community of like-minded people, but in the kind of start-up, enterprising realm.
Yeah, like naturally those people probably are more inclined to start a business.
Yeah.
But it's not just about starting a business. It could be starting a cause, starting a movement. It could be somebody who just wants to get something done.
Yeah. So then, why Caerphilly to have Welsh Ice based?
It's a really good question. I mean, the simple reason was that our my co-founders owned property on this site. We were looking at another building actually originally, and then this building became available, and it had all of the elements and components that you wouldn't find in other environments. So like the coffee shop and the restaurant, the parking, the creche, all that stuff. There are very few other sites anywhere in Wales or anywhere in the UK which have all those components on site. So initially it kind of felt like, okay, we'll make this fit, but then the more and more it evolved and developed, the more we realised actually this is the perfect site for something like this.
So when people are in Caerphilly, what's one thing that they have to do?
The one thing to do in Caerphilly, so the obvious thing would be the castle. The castle's great.
And come to Welsh Eyes.
And come to Welsh Eyes, of course. Naturally, come and get a coffee. But one of my favourite things to do is kind of just to wander around at the top of the mountain. So Caerphilly Mountain, you can, on this side you get a beautiful view through the valley. On the other side you get a beautiful view down across the bay and across the channel.
Okay.
So going for a wander around the mountain, I'd say, is probably the peak.
Yeah. Oh, pun intended. Yeah. You sort of touched on it earlier about the number of businesses that are now actually in ICE. How many was there at the beginning compared to now?
It's probably easier to answer that with how many people were there in the beginning.
Okay.
There was me and a guy called Steve. There were two of us sat next to each other. And Steve now is the CTO on a, so far quite a successful tech startup called Proper. And it was us two sat next to each other in this big empty building, thinking it's all going to be all right.
Okay. Do you think that was important, that sort of self-belief of things are going to build and grow? I
don't know if I really believed it. I don't know if self-belief is the right word. It wasn't until, I think, November time, a company called Noddlepod came in. And that was when I first felt like, okay, maybe we're going to do something here.
Okay.
When those guys came in, it felt like a win for a number of reasons. Firstly, they're just beautiful, brilliant people. they're doing something really, really incredible. They came over from another environment which didn't really work for them.
Okay.
And they felt like this place worked better. So there were a number of reasons why that really helped. But once that happened, then I started to believe a bit more that it might be realistic.
So here at ICE, you offer mentors. How important do you think the process of having mentors are to startups and to people who want to pursue things?
I think that the challenge we have with mentorship is, firstly, you've got to find a mentor who's empathic enough to kind of connect with you. But also you need to be able to feel free to be open and honest with them. So it's not so much just about like the quality of that mentor, but just having someone that you can have an informed conversation with, and you can cut straight to the juicy stuff,
Okay.
rather than having to build up and introduce, well, this is what I'm doing. Okay, well, the principles of this are this, and then, but we wasted an hour just trying to explain what a SaaS business is, or what a clean tech business is, rather than just being able to race straight to that point of context. So that's the first thing, is having someone who understands that context to make it easier to have a conversation with them and bounce ideas off. The other thing is, and maybe we don't have enough of it at a local level, but the kind of expertise that comes from someone who's been there and done it, but isn't cynical.
Okay.
So we have a lot of cynics who don't really remember that kind of... I think that foolishness is a big part of when you first get started. You've got to make the mistakes for yourself to get them and feel them, but if you've got someone who can kind of impart upon you why you don't want to make that mistake, not let you go through it and then learn the hard way.
Yeah.
That's kind of the balance of a good mentor.
So throughout your journey from North Wales to Welsh Ice in Cardiff, Caerphilly, have you had mentors along the way?
Ant and Will, the co-founders, are probably my biggest mentors. There are people who I turn to, who I get quite a lot from. So there's a lady called George who runs a company called TLO, Turn Lights On. We spend a lot of time with each other where we try to kind of share what's really kind of getting us down or causing us anguish, and try and tackle and unpick those problems. And then there's other people as well who I suppose are kind of people I've met along the way who I can confide in. But I don't really necessarily see anyone as a kind of hero or as a role model in that sense.
Yeah.
But people that I know I can turn to as a decentralized resource, I suppose.
So the main use or lesson from these interactions is just kind of reassurance and a support network in a way.
Yeah, and also people who... You talk to some people and they only see half the picture.
Okay.
So the problem with the way that we communicate now through social media and stuff is you only see the good stuff. Like, I never tweet, I can't sleep tonight because I'm freaking out about this problem, or stuff like that, because it's kind of unbecoming of social media. So whenever you speak to a lot of people, they just say, oh, it's going well for you, isn't it? And you're kind of like, I don't like to lie and to kind of, to build up this idea of, yeah, it's going great, we're doing this, this, and this. I try to be quite frank when someone says, how are you doing?
Okay.
And try and say, well, you know what? I don't know, it's a bit of a confusing time when it's appropriate, or, yeah, we're going through some really incredible things at the minute. But I think that's something which I see in a lot of entrepreneurs, is that everyone else can see they're doing better than they can see. I think that's why they constantly drive and strive to achieve
Because
more.
they've got such high standards for themselves.
Yeah, and because they've got a vision in mind, which, like, this now as it is might look to some people as being the destination.
Yeah.
But this still feels a million miles away from where I want it to be.
Okay, so then going on to that, what is your kind of overview of a vision for where Welsh Ice can go? I
don't see it as being just about the building. I see it as being about a kind of, and it's going to sound really kind of weak, but like a philosophy, or like a way that people start to look at how they can be productive in society.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of people who feel that life is about getting a job, a safe job, and that's that. And I don't think that's what we need. We need more people who are doing things which are aligned with their skills, aligned with their passions, and aligned with the problems that we actually face as a society. So more people who feel empowered and motivated to do things to benefit society.
So rather than working to live, it's living to work almost.
Yeah, and living on purpose.
Yeah. So then, swiftly sort of changing the subject, if you could only own and read one book, what would it be and why? There are lots of great books that I've been influenced heavily by, and
obviously, which I've shared with you as well.
Yeah.
So things like Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal, Whole New Mind by Dan Pink, Good to Great by Jim Collins. But the one which if I had to read it every day would be 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership by Jim Deathner. That's the one which is much more like a Bible, or like a kind of list of
Implementation.
practices.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think it'd be that one.
And then on to music. What was the last song you listened to?
The last one I listened to was in the car last night, and it would have been a Kanye song off Life of Pablo, but I can't remember which one it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll just go with what's your favourite song off the album then, if you can think of that.
I don't know if I could pick my favourite song, but I'm a big Kanye fan.
Good, yeah. So what does a captain of innovation do on a day-to-day? What does that role entail?
That's a good question. I don't think it's, and I think this is another problem with why it's hard to inspire people to look at jobs and careers and understand what it's all about. My job isn't a case of turn up, turn the crank, and then leave at 5 o'clock. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, I think it's a lot more inspiring, but it's not that simple to communicate. So a lot of my role is about identifying opportunities, realizing those opportunities, putting in place the resources to realize opportunities, and basically making sure from an oversight view that this place is as world class as it can be.
Okay.
So I think that on a day-to-day basis, that's a load of crap. So in terms of my day-to-day, a lot of it is maintaining relationships, identifying and looking for new potential partnerships, and pulling together kind of proposals and project plans for things that we could eventually deliver.
So you're working on the vision in a way, like, and following through what the goal of this place is. Yeah,
so more of a strategy, and moving us forward.
Okay. So then what are your essential tools for work? You know, like say if you were going away abroad, what do you pack?
So I don't actually, this is kind of something I realised about a year ago, which kind of blew my mind. I don't have a computer at home, which as a complete nerd, I found that something which I just realised all of a sudden. I don't have a computer at home. And likewise, I wouldn't pack my laptop.
Okay.
I think my iPad and my phone and my notepad are pretty much all I need most of the time, because it allows you to plan things in a way which are intentionally scruffy or intentionally rough, so that when it comes to your time with your computer, then you can do it in a maybe more elegant way. But if you're comfortable doing something which is rough, and allowing you then to kind of play with that idea and have it something which is a bit more malleable, I think that's a better way to do it. So phone, charger, battery pack, notepad, and iPad, if I was working away.
Okay, cool. So could I hear your thoughts on the sort of opinions on the value of money and time? Like, just touch on that subject.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we are heavily influenced by the belief that money is a status symbol, and we often forget that the most valuable resource that anyone owns or anyone has access to is something that we spend every single day, which is their time. And really getting your head around the idea of opportunity cost without it being a source of guilt, and without it being a source of frustration, is a good way to maintain productivity. Yeah. So anyone who can realize what they're trying to achieve and then invest their time as cash into that in a way which is really going to yield the most returns, that would be the way I see the relationship between time and money.
Yeah. So then again, being the captain of innovation here, as you mentioned, you have various different roles and sort of lead vision manager in a way. That means you're a very busy person. And how do you have any strategies to help people who are watching be more organised, or any tools to being more organised?
I would be the last person to ask about being more organised. I rely completely on my calendar and on my series of notes. Again, I think it's a practice. I think it's something that you need to really work on. And again, it's something that we've talked about, but that sense of accountability. Yeah. That sense of realising that if you do everything on purpose, then if if you don't reply to an email or if you don't do something that you promised, then you're doing that on purpose by not doing it. So it's a very difficult balance, but a lot of that comes down, I think, as well to being able to say no to things. Yeah. Because if you keep saying yes to everything without thinking of the consequences, you end up in a mess where you can't look up to any of your promises. Yeah.
So looking back maybe 4 or 5 years ago to 2012 when this all sort of came to being, what have been the main lessons that you've learned from then to now, whether it could be do with anything?
There are a couple which kind of really resonate. So the first one is about money, understanding money. I think in those days I thought that £10,000, £20,000 was a lot of money. Okay. Whereas now I realise that if you really want to change the world, £10,000, £20,000 isn't going to do it. Okay. You're talking kind of millions and millions if you really want to make an impact. So that was the first thing which has been a big shock to me. Another thing is understanding who you're waiting for permission from. So if you want to do something, what's stopping you from just doing it? If there's someone who is a gatekeeper or someone who's responsible, then how do you get access to them and how do you put something to them that persuades them? But permission is often not the answer. It's often that you are trying to find some justification in your own mind. And then the flip of that is another big lesson I've learned is that when someone says no, they're not saying no because they're against you. They're saying no because either they have another agenda that you are not meeting, which is reasonable, or that you haven't taken the time to understand what their agenda is and made it fit with what they're looking to achieve. Yeah. What other big lessons have I learned along the way?
Anything to do with like employing people or?
I'm not a great manager, okay. But I think that trust and belief in the team is the key. So I'm way more flexible and relaxed, I think, than most managers would be. But I believe much more in that sense of leadership than in kind of managing. Okay. I think trust and belief in everyone. Like when we go through the application process here, we're mindful they're the ones taking the risk, not us. So okay. we kind of trust and believe in what they're looking to achieve.
And what's next for Gareth Jones then?
Depends.
Okay.
We need to work out what of what we do here can be picked up and put somewhere else. Yeah. So if we are looking to replicate, if we do look to replicate, does that look exactly like this place? Does it have everything the same? Does it have the restaurants, does it have the creche, does it have the parking, all that stuff? Or do we do something which is a lighter version, a lighter touch version? Is it something which is a software package? Is it something which is an events company? Is it something which is a service office company? That's kind of where we're at.
Okay. And then finally, what is a full-time dream chaser to you?
A full-time dream chaser to me is someone who cares more about achieving that dream than they do about following some ridiculous set of rules about what life is or should be.
Great. A true inspiration, an example of someone doing what they love. Welcome to the community and thank you for having the time.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.